The Copa room at the Meridian Casino on a Saturday night was not a place. It was a condition. Cigarette smoke hung in the air like a second ceiling, thick and permanent, catching the chandelier light in amber columns that made every man look like a prophet and every woman look like a painting. The roulette wheel spun. The chips clattered. The jazz quartet in the corner played something slow and menacing that nobody was listening to because nobody needed to. The music was there to remind you that this was supposed to be fun. That reminder was necessary because in the Meridian, fun and danger wore the same tuxedo. It was 11:43 on a Friday night, and the most recognizable woman in the world was losing at blackjack. Elizabeth sat at the center table with particular ease of someone who had never once needed to try. The sequin red dress, floor-length, long-sleeved, blazing under the casino lights like something volcanic, caught every eye in the room whether she wanted it to or not. She did not want it to. That was the problem. Wanting to disappear and being physically incapable of it was the central tragedy of Elizabeth's life, and she had long since made her peace with it by turning it into armor. She laughed when the dealer took her stack. She flagged a waiter for another glass of red wine. She touched the diamond necklace at her throat, a casual gesture, like adjusting a collar, and her eyes moved across the room in a single practice sweep that lasted less than a second and cataloged everything in it. The two men by the bar who were not drinking, the exit door propped open 3 inches with a matchbook, the policeman near the far wall who was watching her rather than the room, and Dean Martin, leaning against a column 20 feet away, a glass of something golden dangling from his fingertips, looking like a man who had not had a sober thought since 1957. She did not look at him directly. She never did. The diamond necklace was not a diamond necklace. It was, technically, a diamond necklace. The stones were real. The platinum setting was real. It had been appraised at figures that made grown men sit down. But the third stone from the center class, the one that caught the light differently from every angle, was hollow. And inside the hollow was a roll of microfilm no larger than a shirt button. And on that microfilm were 47 names. Senators, a deputy attorney general, 2 federal judges, a state governor, a man who ran the country's largest television network. All of them documented photographs, wire records, bank transfers, in financial or operational partnership with the Marcello Syndicate out of New Orleans, with the Chicago outfit, and with the man who owned the Meridian Casino and everything inside it, a man named Veto. Elizabeth had not gone looking for the microfilm. It found her the way that trouble always found beautiful women in powerful rooms, through a man who trusted her more than he should have, who had pressed it into her palm in a parking garage in Burbank 6 weeks ago with the words, "Don't let them find this or we're both dead," and who had been found in the Pacific Ocean 3 days later. She had carried it ever since, because she did not know who to give it to, and because she had come to understand that as long as she had it, she was valuable. And valuable women in her experience were harder to kill than inconvenient ones. The sovereign authority that employed Dean Martin had reached her through an intermediary, a woman who posed as her publicist, who handed her a card with a phone number, who said simply, "You have something that can end several careers and save several hundred lives, and we would like to help you deliver it safely." Dean was the help. He had been inside the Meridian for 3 weeks, playing the role he was born to play. The charming, slightly wrecked entertainer who was always around but never quite present. The man who laughed too easily and drank too much and posed absolutely no threat to anyone. It was a role that required considerable discipline to play convincingly. Dean was one of the most disciplined men alive. Nobody in the Meridian knew that. That was the point. He had identified 2 extraction windows, mapped 4 exit routes, and established a contact point inside the hotel kitchen. He had been 48 hours from getting Elizabeth and the microfilm out clean. Then Veto found out. The intelligence reached Veto through the oldest channel in organized crime, a woman who wanted something. A dancer in the Meridian's floor show had been sleeping with a man who worked for the rival Santangelo faction. She did not know what she was passing along. She only knew that it pleased a man she was trying to keep. So she repeated what she overheard in back hallways and loading docks and the service elevator. Small things. Fragments. Fragments were enough. Veto sat in the glass-walled office above the casino floor and looked down at Elizabeth for a long time. He was 61 years old, built like a refrigerator left in the sun too long, with hands that had broken more things than he could remember and eyes that had stopped registering guilt sometime in the late 1940s. He had built the Meridian from a poker game in a storage unit. He had given up things that decent men could not have named to put his name above that door. He had killed people he loved to protect it. Elizabeth he had liked. That was past tense now. What he could not forgive was not the betrayal. Betrayal was comprehensible. What he could not forgive was that she had been right there, at his table, under his roof, beneath his lights, and he had not seen it. 40 years of reading rooms and reading people, and she had played him for 3 weeks, while a man who was supposed to be a harmless drunk positioned himself to walk out with 47 names that could bring every structure Veto had ever built down into rubble. He set down his glass very carefully. He straightened his jacket. He took the elevator down to the casino floor. Elizabeth saw him coming. She had time to set down her wine glass and think, clearly and without panic. This is it. And then Vito's hand closed around her arm and pulled her sideways, and the whole elegant fiction of the evening collapsed in a single motion. "We need to have a conversation," he said. His voice was quiet. That was the most frightening thing about it. She rose from her chair with the composure of someone who had been doing screen tests since she was 14, which meant she had spent more of her life performing under pressure than not performing. "Veto," she said, "you're hurting my arm." "I'm about to do considerably more than that," he said. He was not wrong. What happened next lasted perhaps 12 seconds and felt like 12 minutes. Veto pulled her toward the blackjack table, and when she resisted, not dramatically, not with screaming, but with the planted, grounded resistance of a woman who had decided she would not be moved, he stopped resisting the impulse he had been suppressing since the elevator and slammed her down onto the table surface with both hands. Crystal wine glasses shattered. Chips scattered across the green fell and hit the floor in a long, rattling cascade. A woman at the adjacent table screamed and then immediately silenced herself. The way that people in rooms controlled by men like Veto learned to silence themselves. Elizabeth's back hit the table, and the breath left her body in a single compressed burst. She looked up at the chandelier. She thought, with complete irrelevance, that it was beautiful. Vito's hand went to her throat. Not to choke her, not yet, but to the necklace. His fingers found the clasp, and he pulled, and the platinum resisted, and he pulled harder. "Give me what's inside it," he said. Still quiet, still controlled. "Give me what you've been carrying around my casino for 3 weeks like you own this place, and I will let you walk out of here. I will let you go back to Hollywood and make your pictures and live your life, and we will never speak again. You have my word." Elizabeth looked up at him. "Your word," she said. "My word," he repeated. She said nothing. He pulled harder on the necklace, and the platinum cut into the back of her neck, and she made a sound that was not quite a cry. Across the room, standing in a spot near the far wall, the man in the police uniform watched this and did not move. Elizabeth had seen the policeman her first night at the Meridian, and something about him had snagged at her without resolving into anything concrete, a feeling beneath language. The way his posture was wrong, too still, too deliberate. Not the watchful stillness of law enforcement, but the waiting stillness of something predatory. The way his eyes, when they found her, did not move with professional neutrality, but with something older and more complicated. She had pushed it aside. There was too much else to manage. Now, sprawled across a blackjack table with Vito's hand at her throat and the room frozen around her, she looked at the man in blue, and the feeling resolved. She knew that jaw. She knew the particular angle of it. The way the left side sat slightly higher than the right from an old injury she had heard about from her mother in a story that was supposed to be about something else and that had lodged itself in her memory at age 7 with no context and no explanation. Her father had died in a car accident in 1951. That was what she had been told. There had been a funeral she was kept away from. A closed casket her mother described as a mercy given the circumstances. She had grieved the idea of him for 12 years. The man in the blue uniform was her father. She could see it in the instant that their eyes met. The recognition hitting him at the same moment it hit her. The same flood of something that might have been shame and might have been grief and was definitely, undeniably terror. He was not a policeman. He was not law enforcement of any kind. He was Vito's disposal specialist, the man they called when a body needed to stop being a problem, and he was standing 12 feet from his daughter, waiting for the signal to drag her away. He was enslaved by debts so deep they had given him a new identity and a blue uniform, and the job of making sure that people who had become inconvenient could not become inconvenient again. He was looking at her the way a man looks at something he loves and is about to destroy. And she understood in that moment that the car accident in 1951 had been a different kind of accident entirely. The accident of being the wrong man in the wrong room, of owing money he could not pay, of making a deal that had eaten the rest of his life whole. She had no time to process any of this. Veto was still pulling at the necklace. That was when Dean broke character. He had been calculating since the moment Veto stepped off the elevator, running exits, running odds, counting bodies in a room, identifying the 3 men who were armed and the 2 who were just large. He had given it 30 more seconds, hoping the situation would resolve itself, knowing it would not. When Elizabeth's head hit the table, he set down his drink. He picked up an empty wine bottle from the nearest service station as he walked. He did not hurry. Hurrying drew attention, and attention was a variable he needed to control for approximately 4 more seconds. He covered the distance in 8 strides. The largest of Vito's guards, 6'4", 260 pounds, a man called Carmine who had been breaking things professionally since the Eisenhower administration, registered him at 6 strides and began to turn. Dean swung the bottle in a flat arc and drove it into the junction of Carmine's neck and shoulder with enough force that the glass did not shatter so much as detonate. Carmine went down like a building. The room erupted. Tables overturned. Guests scattered toward walls and exits. The jazz quartet stopped playing. The drummer, with admirable practical intelligence, slid off a stool and got under it. 3 of Vito's men converged on Dean simultaneously, which was what they were supposed to do, and Dean moved through them with the focused economy of a man who had spent years training for exactly this and 0 time showing it. He broke one man's nose with an elbow. He used the second man's momentum to redirect him into a roulette table. He took a fist to the ribs from the third and felt something flex that should not flex, and hit back twice in the same spot until the third man sat down involuntarily. He had almost reached Elizabeth. He did not reach Elizabeth, for more men came from the service corridor, not casino security, not bouncers, Vito's actual people, trained and calm, and the calculation shifted from manageable to impossible in the space of a breath. They had him by both arms before he could adjust. He broke one grip. They got it back. Someone hit him behind the knee and he went down, and they pulled him upright, and he was looking at Veto across 12 feet of destroyed casino floor. The accounting room, Veto said. That was all he said. They took Dean through the service door. The accounting room was in the basement. It had no windows. The walls were poured concrete and had been poured with purpose. The way that walls in certain rooms and certain buildings are poured with the specific understanding that sound will need to stay inside them. They sat Dean in a chair and secured his wrists, and they brought in 2 men he hadn't seen before and a canvas bag that contained, among other things, 2 iron hammers of the kind used in construction work. They asked him about the microfilm. He told them he didn't know what they were talking about. They explained that this was not the answer they were looking for. They were systematic about it in a way that suggested practice, working methodically through the architecture of damage. Fingers first, because fingers contain information about pain that the rest of the body learned from. Then the left knee, which shattered with sound like a branch in winter. Then the right, when the left produced a wrong answer. Dean did not give them the wrong answer or the right one. He gave them nothing at all. He held something in his mind, a specific image, fixed and clear, and he stayed inside it and let the pain be a thing that was happening rather than a thing that was him, and he did not speak. What he knew, what they did not know he knew, was that the microfilm around Elizabeth's neck was not the real microfilm. He had made the swap 3 days earlier in an elevator, during an exchange so brief it had taken less than 4 seconds. The real microfilm was in a location he would not be saying out loud regardless of what happened to his knees. The one in the necklace was a blank. Beautiful, perfect, indistinguishable to anyone who was not already looking for the difference. He had not told Elizabeth. He had not told anyone. If Elizabeth genuinely believed the necklace held the real microfilm, She would behave in ways that confirmed that belief, and her performance, unlike his, would not have to be performed at all. In the accounting room in the basement of the Meridian Casino, with shattered bones and a concrete wall at his back, Dean Martin smiled at the ceiling. It was not a large smile, but it was real. Elizabeth had lived through enough scenes and enough films to understand the mechanics of survival. The most important mechanic was this: do not wait to be rescued. Rescue was a narrative device. It almost never arrived on schedule. What arrived on schedule was whatever was already in motion, and you worked with what was in motion. What was in motion was Vito's hand on her necklace and a shard of crystal wine glass 6 inches from her right hand. She reached for it without telegraphing the reach. A slow drift, the movement of someone who has stopped fighting, who is going limp, who is conceding. Vito's grip on the necklace loosened slightly as her body stopped resisting. That was the opening. She took the glass shard between her fingers and she drove it into his hand at the precise location of the tendon that controlled his grip, and she pushed until she felt the resistance give. Veto made a sound she had never heard a human being make. She rolled off the table and hit the floor and went under the nearest gaming table on her hands and knees as the first shot went over her head. She did not know where the gun had come from. She did not need to know. She needed to move. The casino floor was a geography she had memorized across 3 weeks of calculated losing, of lingering at the wrong table for longer than the games required. She crawled through a chaos of overturned chairs and scattered chips and the legs of people running in directions that had nothing to do with her, and she came up behind the bar in a crouch, breathing. Vito's blood was on her dress. Her necklace clasp had broken, and the necklace was gone. That meant Veto had it. That meant the blank microfilm was in his hand. She held that thought for 1 second, and then set it aside, because it was Dean's problem, and she could not solve Dean's problems from the floor of a casino. She could, however, solve the immediate tactical problem. The velvet curtains that framed the Meridian's grand windows were floor to ceiling and ancient, the heavy theatrical kind that absorbed light and sound, and did not belong in any room that had updated its fire code in the last 20 years. Elizabeth found a small maintenance panel behind the bar. She had found it on her third night, cataloging exits, and she opened it, and she pulled a manual gas line valve 1/4 turn, and she waited 4 seconds, and she used Dean's lighter, which he had been carrying since Tuesday, when she had lifted it from his jacket pocket during a conversation about something else entirely, to touch flame to the bottom hem of the nearest curtain. The curtain went up like it had been waiting for permission. The gas line took 11 seconds. Elizabeth was through the service door before the first cylinder went. The explosions came in sequence, each one deeper and more structural than the last, and the columns of black smoke that followed them rose to the Meridian's ventilation system and poured out of every venting gap and opening in the building, and the casino floor disappeared into a darkness that the panic made complete. She took the stairs. The Las Vegas skyline at midnight from 50 stories was a thing of extraordinary beauty and complete indifference. The neon signs stretched to every horizon in colors that had no names, and the desert beyond them was perfectly black, and the air at that height was cold in the way the high places are cold, with a clarity that made everything below feel like a story. Veto came through the rooftop door 40 seconds after Elizabeth. His right hand was wrapped in a napkin that had gone thoroughly red. He was breathing hard. He was also still the most dangerous man Elizabeth had ever shared a room with, and she knew it, and she moved backward toward the edge of the roof in a way that was deliberate and controlled and looked like fear. She needed him to follow her. She needed him moving toward her and away from the door, away from the stairwell, away from whatever remained of his organization below. She needed him to close the distance between them, because that distance was the only variable she could still manipulate. She talked while she moved. She talked about the microfilm, about the names, about the men whose careers would end when those names became public. And she watched his face and adjusted what she was saying based on what she saw there, where the anger was and where the calculation was and which one was louder in each moment. She had been doing this since she was a teenager. It was the oldest skill she had. She stopped when her heels hit the low parapet at the roof's edge. Veto was 4 feet away, close enough that she could see that his hand was worse than he was admitting, close enough that the napkin was soaked through. She said, "You never should have come up here alone." She stepped to the side, not backward, sideways, and she grabbed his outstretched arm with both hands, and she used the momentum of his own forward step, redirected, applied at the precise angle that made his weight work against him rather than for him, and Veto went over the parapet with an expression of total surprise, which was, she thought, the appropriate expression for a man encountering for the first time in his life a consequence he had not arranged. He fell 50 floors. He landed on the Meridian sign, the massive neon installation that bore his name in letters 6 feet tall, and the sign's frame collapsed under the impact, and the neon tube shattered in a cascade of cold light, and the name Meridian in glowing letters went dark in sections, and then it was just a night and the smoke and the distant sound of sirens beginning. Elizabeth stood at the roof's edge for exactly 3 seconds. Then she went back inside. They found Dean in the alley behind the Meridian at 3:45 in the morning, which was when the garbage trucks ran their pre-dawn circuit through the casino district. He was inside the 4th truck on the route, having made arrangements with the driver 22 days earlier during a conversation that appeared to be about nothing at all. He was, by any clinical measure, in catastrophic condition. Both knees had sustained fractures, for fingers on his left hand had been broken systematically. 2 ribs from the casino floor fight had cracked through. He had a concussion he would not fully acknowledge for 2 weeks. He looked like something that had been processed rather than a person. He was smiling. The microfilm, the real one, which had been in a sealed compartment behind the dashboard of a car parked on the 3rd level of the Meridian's garage since Tuesday morning, was recovered by the contact Dean had established. It left Las Vegas in the pocket of a woman who looked like a cleaning service employee because she was a cleaning service employee, which was the most effective cover for moving through casino infrastructure that anyone had ever devised. 47 names went to the people who knew what to do with them. Elizabeth did not wait to see what happened next. She had spent 3 weeks waiting, and she was comprehensively done with it. She met with the Santangelo faction's representative at a diner in Henderson at 5 in the morning, a small man in a brown suit who ordered coffee and listened carefully and did not interrupt. And she laid out the terms, the real microfilm, through her intermediary channel, in exchange for 2 things: her permanent and documented exit from any obligation to any faction, and the location and safety guarantee of one Dean Martin, who was currently in the back of a garbage truck and needed a hospital. The small man in the brown suit drank his coffee. He said, "Done." Elizabeth shook his hand. She had never shaken a cleaner hand that felt dirtier, but the world was full of compromises, and this one was buying her a life and saving someone who deserved to be saved. She boarded a flight to New York that morning. From New York, she went to London. From London, after 6 weeks of existing very quietly in a city that was large enough to absorb her, she went to Paris. She did not go as Elizabeth. She had papers that said otherwise, arranged by people who arranged such things for women in situations like hers. And the papers were good, and Paris in the winter was cold and gray and absolutely beautiful, and nobody on the street knew who she was or cared to know, which was the first real freedom she had ever experienced in her adult life. She found a cafe on the Rue de Rivoli that suited her, small, unfashionable, a little dark, with good coffee and a proprietor who did not make conversation. She went there every morning. She sat at the same table by the window and watched the city move past and felt, day by day, the accumulated tension of the last 3 years begin to unknot itself from somewhere deep in her spine. 3 months after Paris, she opened her purse for her wallet and found something that was not her wallet. A lighter, brushed silver, unremarkable, with a small piece of paper folded inside the lighter's casing. She had not put it there. She knew the lighter because she had borrowed it and forgotten to return it. And apparently someone had done the returning for her with additional editorial commentary. She unfolded the paper. The handwriting was economical. Just 3 words, and then a space, and then a signature that was barely a signature, just a letter, the initial of a first name, the way that people sign things when they want you to know who wrote it without writing it. Bones heal. Dignity does not. D. Elizabeth sat in her cafe on the Rue de Rivoli in the November light, with Dean Martin's lighter in her hand, and the note on the table in front of her. Outside the window, Paris continued to be Paris, indifferent and magnificent, and entirely unconcerned with the private histories of the people who moved through it. She folded the note. She put the lighter in her coat pocket, where it stayed. She ordered another coffee. She did not go back to Hollywood. She did not go back to any of it. The lights, the cameras, the sequin dresses and the diamond necklaces, and a room's full of men who had decided before she walked in what she was and what she was worth. She stayed in Paris. She taught herself to paint. She was not very good at it, and she did not particularly care, which was itself a kind of freedom she had not known was available. Dean Martin, as far as anyone could establish, recovered. The knees were a long project. The fingers healed clean. He returned to performing within a year, and nobody who watched him on stage would have known what the performance was concealing, because concealment had always been his most refined art form. He was funnier than ever. He seemed lighter somehow, as though he had put something down and chosen not to pick it back up. They never spoke again. That had been part of the arrangement. And arrangements, once made, had to be honored or they meant nothing. But on certain mornings in Paris, when the light came to the cafe window at a particular angle and the city was quiet enough to hear itself, Elizabeth would take the silver lighter from her coat pocket and hold it in her palm and think about a man who had sat in a concrete room with iron hammers and said nothing, who had smiled at a ceiling with shattered bones, who had made a swap in an elevator in 4 seconds that nobody saw and told no one about, who had written 3 words on a piece of paper and arranged for her to find him in a city she hadn't told him she was going to. She would think about all of that. Then she would put the lighter back in her pocket, finish her coffee, and go home. She had a painting to finish.